everybody, and welcome to this edition of Breaking Down Barriers. I'm Jenna Heilman, Executive Director of HDYO. And today I'm excited to be joined by two gentlemen who are part of our ambassadors here to talk about what are some of the challenges with men in general when it comes to seeking out support, especially within the HD community. This is a really important topic as across the board, we typically see more females participating in programs, more females coming in for support services, but we need to be able to be there to support the whole community. So we wanted to dive a little bit into this topic to see what their own experiences are like so we can better understand how we can support everybody holistically. So first, we're going to start off with some introductions. Eric, I'll start with you if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Eric. I'm a 23-year-old male living in Montreal, Canada now. I bounced around across Canada, but I live in Montreal, and I'm currently doing my master's in engineering. Um, yeah.
That's great. Thanks. And Matt.
Yeah, Matt Anderson. I am 41 and gene positive. I found that out in the last year. I have three kids and I do IT support for a bank and I live in Arkansas.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I think this is such an important conversation, so I really appreciate you all being so open to sharing your experiences. I'm going to pick on Matt at first. You kind of already teed this up with sharing that you just found out about being gene positive within the last year. I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about your overall impact in what that experience was like when you first found out about Huntington's disease and then ultimately went through testing.
Yeah, so first finding out about Huntington's, uh, that's been in my family ever since my grandpa, along with my mother and four of her siblings. And so I kind of grew up for the last 20 years or so, I kind of assumed that I was gonna have Huntington's. We haven't had anyone test negative yet, so uh, that mindset has kind of always been following me around. I would say haunting me, not just following me around. Uh, it wasn't so much the fear of that I was going to have it because I assumed that I did, but the not knowing and the uncertainty around all of that was consuming, I would say. It's just so I ended up doing a lot of research, found Enroll HD, and that's when I started talking to my older sister about what Enroll HD was. No one ever, a lot of people in our family had not searched out any research. Not a lot of information was known about it. So we found the Enroll HD Center and found out that we could do anonymous testing there. And myself and my sister went back in around 2020, and right around COVID time, we actually got our tests there.
Mhm.
And then I went 4 years uh, pondering when I wanted to get those results.
Mhm.
And so my daughter was about to get married, uh, and that was kind of the final push I needed. That, despite whatever insecurities I had around it, for the sake of my daughter and her family process,
Mhm.
family decision making process, I needed to find out then. So that's I went, and my sister and her family were there with me as well, and I got my test results, and she did not, which was fine. So that's how it went.
Yeah. Wow. So I think that's a really important message for people too, just in general, when thinking about testing, is sometimes people think that when you go through the testing, you have to get the results, during a certain specific amount of time, and you don't even ever have to get the results. So that's a really important part of your story too, for those listening at risk who haven't gone through it. Yeah. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm 23 now, living at risk. I learned about Huntington's when I was like 14. Like it had always been around in my family and we would go to events. I just don't think I ever thought to ask about it.
Mhm.
But my parents sat me and my brother down and explained that my dad was gene positive. Um, and yeah, I think for the longest time, I was like, oh, well, I'm 14 living at risk. Why would I worry about it so far in the future? Uh, I never, like, I knew it was going to impact my family and I worried about that, but I just figured it was so far in the future that I wouldn't need to worry about it. And now looking back, I can see how a lot of that worry led to, say, like destructive coping mechanisms. And uh, yeah, so I think I ignored it for a long time. And it wasn't really till I graduated high school at about 18 when I started to actually face it more head on instead of just thinking that it was something that would pass.
Mhm. Mhm. No, thanks for sharing that. I think it's so many different perspectives within the both of you, and I think that that's so crucial with this conversation because it sets up the tone and the decision making process that you all have gone through, especially when it comes to support and reaching out. So thank you both for sharing that. Um, so I'm curious, what was the situation like whenever you first reached out for support? I know, Matt, your first point of contact with the overall HD community was through an enroll visit. Eric, I know you've had a very different experience. So what was the catalyst? What did it look like for you to reach out? And who was that you reached out for support?
I
Either
prefer.
one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, I mentioned enroll was kind of my first touch point with the research community in general.
Mhm.
And that was at Wichita, Kansas, at the Hereditary Neurological Disease Center out there. And I know, I was kind of researching the few places that were within driving distance
Mhm.
of Arkansas to even go do it. And uh, I believe I got an email from the social worker there. I reached out through an email, and she was actually great. It's someone that I've continued to talk to through the years since then. And my sister, which my sister and myself have always been kind of support people for each other
Mhm.
anyway. We both joined the military together and served we served 6 years together overseas, and then which I served after that too. But so we had always been each other's back end support. But she's a whole lot quieter than I am, and I'm about the only person she would reach out to for support. So after doing more research into HSG and stuff, I found their working groups and ended up getting in the working group uh, to help out as like a patient advisory on those. And that's where I actually met Spencer Deal and several of the Vanderbilt team that were in that group, and found Vanderbilt's HD Happy Hour
Mhm.
support group that they do. And I have attended that very regularly for probably the last year and a half or so,
Mhm.
and it's been really helpful, very helpful. Was actually able to finally get my wife to sit on one of those because obviously, we're not the only ones uh, in HD families who need support. It's the whole it's a whole family thing. So.
It sounds like you were kind of the one championing for even other people in your family, whether it was your sister or your wife, to get involved, which seems like an awful lot for you to manage. That's kind of how we see that it happens, where it just takes that one person to reach out, and then other people realize that it's okay, and you should reach out for support. How does that made you feel that you kind of paved the way for your family?
Oh, I mean, it is the reason that I don't have a lot of trouble dealing with my own Huntington's
Hmm.
results in my own, what I know is to come ahead. But what I do struggle with is I know I have watched so many of them in the last 20 years, whether it be
Hmm.
my dad or, my sisters, because I have a sister does a lot of reaching out for support, but I have other sisters who have not been the same. They were older, and, their ideas of talking about it at all are so different, even
Hmm.
among, one family. Everybody sees that reaching out for support as from totally different lens. Uh,
Hmm.
and I've at least tried to always be there anytime that someone reaches a point to where they feel like it's okay to reach out. I hope that they'll know that they can reach out to me first so that I can help them actually get the support that they do need.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing that. And for those who don't know, Matt mentioned HSG, that stands for Huntington Study Group, which is based in the US. Eric, I'm curious what your experience was like.
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of went 4 years thinking that I had nobody to talk to about it and saying like I thought I didn't because I think for me it was just a really, really heavy thing. And my parents and brother were always there to talk to me if I needed. I just think at the time I assumed that like I didn't want to put that burden onto them or like any other uh, trick my brain was playing on me. So it really took until like the end of high school, COVID times, and I got an email from the Huntington Society of Canada that they were doing these walk runs for HD, and they were all virtual. And I was like, okay, well, like I've been running a bit more. I like this. I'm gonna go do a 10K. And there's this like really liberating experience, just like running around my town, even if it was like just for me, but it was like the first event um, I had ever done that had HD tied to it.
Mhm.
And then after that, like I really picked up running and kept doing that every year. But I'd say that was the first thing. And I think what made it really easy was it was something that I could just do by myself, but I still had supports. It wasn't as big as like needing to drive to a neighboring city or anything like that. Because I grew up in like a really rural area. And then after that, just kept getting emails from the Canadian Huntington Society. It was like now they have an at-risk and gene positive virtual support group. I was like, that sounds really great. Like I'll lock myself in my room and I'll tell my family about it, but I don't think I ever talked about it with them. But it was just having those tiny little things that helped kind of loosen uh, any of the barriers that I had. And since then, it's just I don't know, it's been really great seeing how that support structure's changed over time.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into that question of how has your need for support changed? And I know, Matt, you're a little bit newer into the more structured support, but even in the year and a half, we've seen you get even more involved in reaching out with other people in the community. So, how has your needs changed, and how has that support network changed around you, either just because of reaching out, or individual needs, or just kind of naturally?
Oh. It's kind of weird. I guess the most that I've seen it change is that, as far as not not so much rich, needing more support for myself personally, but the the need that I feel to do to do more to encourage family and close friends and people within my state in general. There's not a lot of support structure for
Mhm,
HD in Arkansas anyway, and that has really drove me to try to find something that I can do to help all of them. It
mhm,
it is it is probably the most therapeutic thing that I can do for myself is to find a way to encourage other people who are
mhm,
not seeking out that support to do so because it's really easy to bury all of those concerns that we have about HD,
mhm,
and how it affect our family broadly. And I went through a time in my life in the military, especially, back 10 years ago, uh, men seeking support it was, I won't say it was just, it wasn't, so it wasn't something that they encouraged and was,
mhm,
probably more so, it was frowned upon more than, more than encouraged. And
mhm,
that led to a lot of dark times in my life after I got out of the military because I didn't always go seek support like I do now. I wasn't nearly as open with the struggles that I had personally during that time. Uh, so, there's been people like uh, Anne, is it Anne right from Canada, writes the
mhm,
books.
mhm. No,
What's her?
Aaron.
Erin,
Yeah.
yeah, Erin. I actually watched her speak on a video from HSG a couple years ago, and her story and her bravery to be able to stand up and say all the things that she had been holding in for so long. And another one that I never talked to personally, but I watched. His name was Brent, and he was actually on one of y'all's videos,
Hmm.
and he kind of gave this same talk, and that really did a lot as well to kind of reinforce to me that men seeking support is it's perfectly fine, and
Hmm.
it should actually be held up as a strength to be able to reach out rather than the alternatives, especially in HD families that not seeking support leads to. I lost one of my uncles I did lose to suicide,
Hmm.
when he was 45 years old. So uh, that also puts a whole lot of extra pain on a family that's, not necessary a lot of times. So,
Hmm. Thank you for sharing all of that,
yep.
Eric.
Um, yeah, I think, like I said, it was that first, like those very small things, and then eventually it kept going. So, like from the initial 10K, signed up to do a marathon later that year, and I did a few more, like marathons, ultra marathons to fundraise and like really spread awareness within my networks. I think those were always really, really important things to me. Just even posting on social media. Like I remember the first time I just shared it onto my story. Uh, I was so nervous, like I didn't even open Instagram the next day. So that was definitely a big one. And then I think like a really big turning point for me was realizing that I can talk to my local people about it too.
Hmm.
Like they don't just have to be in the HD community.
Hmm.
Like I remember I dated my girlfriend for 6 months before I told her, and it was a really emotional conversation, but I just couldn't bring myself to have it. And since then, like now we talk really openly about it, and
Hmm.
they can be hard conversation every time, of course, but it's just a skill that you have to practice. Um, so I think that, going from uh, kind of volunteering advocacy and then starting to reach out into my own networks was really big for me. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's a big one. Another thing to add, I think, was going to events in person helped me build my HD community. Like my first Canadian event was really big about 3 years ago, and of course, going to any of the HDYO events, whether it's the Congress or the camps in the summer, I think it just helped me get a lot of perspective. Um, you realize how uh, you're not really alone through it, even though it might seem like that uh, when you're starting out, and everybody is there to support you at whatever stage in the journey you're at. So I think a combination of all those three things has really
Hmm.
been how my support network's grown over the years.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because first of all, Matt, I meant to say this earlier. Thank you so much for your service in the military. That takes incredible bravery, and we really appreciate both you and your sister and all of the servicemen and women out there who support their country's efforts. Um, you both have kind of talked about this a little bit in your own ways about it sounds like, and we know this, anecdotally that community building was the first big thing that maybe some of you were missing, the ability to just kind of have a group of people around you and you have built it in very different ways, which is what's needed based off of your own personality, where you are in your journey, what you feel comfortable with. But Eric, even like you said, doing something remotely, um, running, you kind of felt like a bigger cause. So it wasn't necessarily that you were reaching out to individuals with that, but it kind of gave you the purpose of and the feeling like you're a part of something. And then Matt, you started off by being a part of something, specifically with research and making that first step to talk to a social worker, and then now getting involved with support groups. And so it really was kind of feeling that individual need of what that looked like, whether it was community or getting some kind of support and acknowledgement from somebody else outside the family too. all of these different things and how you all have built that individually. But I see some of those parallels, but it's all based off of what you felt the most comfortable with and what made the most sense for you at the beginning, and then how you kind of evolved too. Yeah. Well, Matt, I know you touched on this a little bit, specifically within the military, but there are a lot of stigmas out there about men in support and mental health support. Eric, I want to tease you as being someone at 23. What have you witnessed from some other young people or even within your family about what that maybe that fear or stigma or anything that they've experienced, if they have?
Yeah, I I was really excited to do this video in part because it actually like gave me that bridge to talk to my friends about it. So I asked them for a lot of their thoughts too, because uh, I only see things from one perspective. But
Mhm.
I think, at least for me, it was like it was really just acknowledging that it was letting go of the belief that like I've handled things before. I don't need to reach out to anybody else. Um, I think a lot of things like that are kind of baked into society, like Matt was talking about. Um, it's like I'm running ultra marathons, like that takes mental grit, right? Like, of course, I can handle my emotions.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't even have to be like this macho man way of thinking about it. Like, I think that's everybody can understand that stereotype, but these things can still come in more subtle ways. Um, I think there's also a bit of a feeling that like you're letting other people down. Like if you're always the person that's supporting other people and then suddenly I'm asking them for help, I was questioning if they would be uh, burdened by me asking for support. And I don't know, like you say these things out loud now and you're like, oh, what a that's a silly thought. Of course, it's not as black and white as that. And I just wish that I had that perspective at the time. Um, I think you never really know like what's unhealthy until somebody else points it out. Or for me, it was like seeing other people that I really admired, um, admitting, no, admitting is like the wrong word, but like you see how flexible they can be and being able to work through these things. Um, there's the old saying that like a tree is so strong because it can bend in the wind. And if
Mhm.
a tree was really rigid, it would just snap. So it's not uh, like as resilient when it's not able to, you know, come and go with with the wind. But
Mhm.
as you can tell, it's a very like hard thing to talk about. But yeah, I think for me, it was seeing people who I really looked up to and hearing them talk about their stories or having them come to me and say like, "Hey, I don't want to overstep, but like if you're ever wanting to talk, even if it's just something small, like we can talk." And finding ways to do that with guys is always a bit tough.
Mhm.
I think just like sitting down in a room is very uncomfortable and just talking about it like it's a therapy session or something, but there's a lot of ways you can get creative with it. Like I found going for hikes or drives with friends is really
Mhm.
nice, or even just like something as stereotypical as like throwing a ball around and just talking about things because it keeps your mind busy, but you're still able to talk about those things without getting overwhelmed. Um, yeah, I mean, that was pretty extensive, but
No, but I
that's
think
all I have
that's
to say.
no, I think that's very insightful because it doesn't have to be a traditional office setting. Eric, we're actually doing a breaking down barriers that I filmed last week, so it may or may not be out by the time I do this, but about in the US, and they are now moving to international, but Game Over HD is a video game um, program where people who are impacted by HD who can just join a video game. And that's a level of support even where it's like you don't have to sit there and feel like you're under the microscope or you have people making notes about you. Like sometimes people, it's a fear of mine to going to traditional therapy is that like judgment piece of it. But there's so many other ways to do that. And I think it's just acknowledging what you need individual, what you're looking for, and then finding the right platform to receive that. No, I think that's really important. Matt, you're I'm so older than you, but you're closer to my age. And I know within my lifetime, I've seen a lot of shifts with mental health resources. And I know you talked specifically about the military and kind of what that culture was like. How have you seen some of those things shift specifically within men, seeking support and those kinds of things?
Yeah, like I said, we're closer to the same age. So, I mean, I'm so glad for people like Eric who are younger, and that that stigma and that stereotype is not. I mean, it's still there, I would say, in certain circles, but it has definitely changed for the positive in the last 8 to 10 years or so. It's there's been a big push, to intentionally do away with those stigmas and stereotypes, and you know, I think he kind of mentioned that. Eric mentioned that you can still do things. It's not, there's this stereotype that also, if you have HD, you're helpless. And it's not the case. I work for a bank. He runs marathons. It doesn't make us useless.
Mhm.
And, but it's, sometimes a diagnosis can feel that way. Like it's, not only a death sentence, but it's a ending of your end point of your life when you find out that you have it, and it doesn't have to be that way. Uh,
Mhm.
that's one of the biggest reasons that I've tried to get my kids and younger people in my family to kind of be engaged earlier on, because I know from my own standpoint is dealing with it over the years internally only. Uh, it probably led to a lot of bad decisions that I've made in the past,
Yeah.
and I'm certain it played a part in that. Uh, Dealing with things and taking things head on normally is you have more of a positive outcome. It's not
Mhm.
always going to change the out, change the end outcome. Uh, we can't change having HD, but we can change how we handle it and how we deal with it. Uh, it's I was talking to Seth. You mentioned, I have to mention Faith, who is on yeah, she's in my support group, and I just love her to death. So
She's awesome.
she is awesome. Uh, but I was talking to Seth Rotberg, and it's been probably a year and a half ago. I found him on LinkedIn and really uh, I started questioning him on things that he could do, to try to do something. I was looking for something. And I watched a lot of his videos that he had done from years ago, and of course he was HDYO. He'd been in the scene for a long time, and I was really jealous because I had went the last 10 years or more, 15 years, kind of. Uh, I didn't even know there were so many of these communities that were out there that I didn't even know existed. You know, Especially social media has really helped uh,
Mhm.
in the last 5 years or so. It's really, you can find anything now, but kind of when I first started looking, I mean, I was just doing research stuff. There was no the social media aspect of it. Kind of, it made me think I was in the dark, and then I kind of quit looking for a long time, and I was actually really surprised at all the different routes that there are to be involved. Uh, I'll cough while you sneeze.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to hide it.
uh, But talking to him, and one of the thing he said that I could do to help the most was he said, the one thing you can do that'll help the most is share your story.
Mm.
Just tell your story. I said, okay, and I never really put anything. I had kind of talked about my mom and dad a little bit on Facebook and stuff before that, but uh, after that, I finally did make that first post on Facebook, sharing my story, and of course that, yeah, it's like the scariest thing that you've ever done, to hit the send button on that initial post, but it really does. It is, uh, what's the word? It's a very relieving thing once that you've done it. It just gets easier from there. It's never really just easy to talk about, but it does get easier with time and the more that you're able to talk about it. So
Mhm.
uh,
I
I
can
have
imagine what that
yeah,
was like for you.
Yeah, I was having a really hard time about the week leading up to actually getting my test results because I had anticipated it for so long, so many years. You know, I started really getting a lot of anxiety building leading up to that day. And one of my biggest support channels has always been my church that I am involved
Mhm,
in, my personal relationship with God, my faith, and I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you deal with the news the way that you do? And
mhm,
it's, and I said, I can never handle news like that. I said, well, sure you can. I said, it's not, and to me, that strength comes from God. It's
mhm,
not, I'm not inherently or genetically a strong person. And there's a young man who is a preacher who also has HD, and I found his testimony that he gave on Facebook in a Facebook group one night, and that it was the perfect time. I heard it at the perfect time. I needed to hear it because I heard it a few days before I got my test results, and it kind of reassured my faith and let me know that I can't do these things on my own, but
mhm,
uh, reaching out. Uh, if you are a person of faith, uh, dig deep into that, and it will help.
mhm, mhm. What what would be a piece of advice if you had to talk to men out there about support? What would you say to them?
I'll pass it back to Eric.
Okay.
Okay, up for it.
Yeah, it's funny because like I was asking a lot of my friends about this, and one of them said like his really big turning point was somebody in his life was asking like, when you think of mental health, like where would you put that on your priorities? He's like, I don't know, like really important, like probably like a seven. It's like, okay, like just a seven, like I don't know, like if I really think about it, probably like an eight or a nine. And the person said back to him, like, well, what if you made it a 10? Like, you need to understand how important this is. It plays into everything you're doing. Like,
Mhm,
it's one thing to talk about mental health in the context of HD, um, but even just like how you manage yourself throughout the day. You know, I find for myself, like if I'm getting a bit anxious in conversations, like I'm better able to notice that and like bring myself back. It
mhm,
just it goes to everything you're doing. And I wish somebody really drilled that point home to me a lot sooner because I mean, like juggling so many different things, you really have to be conscious of where you're putting your time and attention and be uh, I think being like a bit uh, more caring for myself was
mhm,
something that was a bit hard. I was like, well, I'm so hardworking, like that's so deeply embedded in my identity. Uh, it was really hard for me to get out of the cycle of just keeping myself so busy that I wouldn't really think about these things. Um, I think another point, if I could add, would be like
mhm,
it's dynamic and it's so dynamic. Like I have rarely heard any two people talk about it in the same way. Some people have different coping strategies. Like
mhm,
it's really like it's whatever works for you. And it might feel really awkward at the start, but it's just like any other thing you're learning how to do. Like if you're learning a new sport, it's gonna feel really awkward at the start, but slowly you find ways to do these things.
mhm,
Um, I just think the unique part about mental health is like it looks different for everybody. And
mhm,
the ways you cope, the ways you're talking about these things, like you just, for me, like I had to like sit down once a week and I was just practicing, self-reflection and talking to other people about these things. And you start to get a feel um, for things. Like I think it seems really, really daunting and it can be a really big barrier, but just make it bite-sized. It's like anything else.
No, it does take practice. And I think that's where people give up is that they're not like, they do it one time and it feels awkward, or they do it one time and they don't necessarily feel any better when it comes to some of these exercises. It takes work, and which can also be taxing on your mental health, but you have to understand that you do need to invest in yourself and take those steps, whatever that looks like and what's most comfortable for you. Matt.
Kind of like going to the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's painful, but it builds, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one thing that kind of always, of course, I grew up in that stigma age of, men have to be strong, they can't cry,
Mm-hmm.
they were providers. And one thing, that I might remind all the tough guys who are afraid to ask for help is that, like myself, I have a family of five immediate people who rely on me. They rely on me for nearly everything. And we're all capable of we are all capable of being broken if we do not ask for help and seek that out. And if we don't seek the support that we need to keep our mental health at a kind of a stable place, you know, we'll end up at a point to where we can't be that support and that provider for the people who rely on us. Uh, so it just, if nothing else, you can almost use it as a tool to care for your family and the people who you provide for, because
Mm-hmm.
you have to have yourself first in a place to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this has been really great. And I really appreciate both of you being so vulnerable and sharing your perspectives. And I think it's important too, just for everybody out there, that this conversation is one conversation. And like we've said, it takes a lot of conversations to figure out what works best for you. So always feel comfortable reaching out to HDYO to have that conversation, reaching out to local support networks, anybody that you feel like is a confidant or could be helpful to support you in your journey. Um, Real quick, Eric, Matt, any closing thoughts?
I have one, just because I was thinking like what past me would be thinking if I was watching this now. I think I would have just been nodding along, like, yeah, no, of course. Mental health is important. Logically, that makes sense, but I still want to like do it all myself. Or like um maybe like part of me would be watching this and like feeling like it was, I don't know, still like not fully sinking. Like you're watching these people talk about mental health and you're like, yeah, no, that makes sense. But, what if it's like a trick? Or what if I start talking about it and people around me um, start giving me like less responsibility or start thinking less of me in any way? And I think my response to that is like once you start working at it, even just like small things, you start to realize how not true that is in so many cases. Um, I think we all live in our own worlds, and sometimes that world prevents us from seeing other ways to be living.
Mhm.
Uh, I would just say like do something, like just
Yeah.
have like a constant reminder on that, and slowly over time you'll start to develop it. And like I don't know, I definitely am not perfect. I think it really is a process, but um, you get so many more benefits out of it than it takes. The return on investment is what I'm trying to say,
Hmm.
of starting to take care of your mental health, starting to have these conversations for yourself, or if you have other friends, just like reach out a little hand. It doesn't have to be anything grand. It just building that support.
Hmm. Matt, any last words?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we look at people who we think are strong out there, and sometimes we admire them because we think that they don't have struggles. And something I have found out is, uh, you know, the vast majority of people who we think are really strong are dealing with, equally or worse problems than we are. And they also have mental health struggles that they may or may not share with other people, but they're all dealing with something. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, it's it is not a weakness.
Mhm.
Leave with that. It's not a weakness to ask for help and reach out to anybody. It does not have to be a social worker or a advocacy group necessarily. If there's some individual that you think might help, reach out to those individuals. Everyone that I have ever reached out to has went far above and beyond uh, to be as helpful as possible and have been, really instrumental in uh, building up that support chain for myself. So,
Yeah, that's great.
Could I
Yeah,
add
Eric.
one more small thing? I just remembered it. I'm going to use a sports analogy because we're talking about guys. So it's like if you're going to the gym and you're developing how to be a bit more resilient, then when you're out in the world or you're playing your sport, you're less likely to get injured. And you can think of mental health in a similar way. Like I used to think mental health was just like if I'm like throwing myself against a wall, like if I'm unable to get out of bed or any of these like really far extreme scenarios, um, it's not like that. I would say like the vast majority of times, at least speaking personally, like mental health practice is more akin to going to a gym or like doing physiotherapy exercises. It's this like preventative thing. It doesn't have to look like um, you snap your ankle and now you're in the ER for something.
Mhm.
Like if you think of it that way, at least for me, like it's a lot uh, less scary. It's a lot easier to start paying attention to these things.
Yeah, we hear that a lot where it doesn't make the hurt less, but it makes your response more healthy whenever things happen, whenever you get the support and build those tools for coping and building that mental health. Your brain is a muscle. So, I mean, it is very similar where you have to continually to work on that. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much again. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for all of you watching. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to us, reach out to anyone who's a trusted source. But please know that you're not alone and you have a family around you to support you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
thanks for having us.